Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina, your host. You can listen to this episode on all my social media platforms or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. At Activista Rise Up, we have great conversations with leaders, with activists. We hope to inspire you to take action by listening to the stories of these leaders and what they're doing out there to change the world. Today, you will meet an amazing leader, someone who has inspired my own activism at times when I have felt that I am too busy to do something or I am too exhausted. I listen to all the work that she's doing and I say, no, I have to keep going. So that leader is Monica Ramirez. She is the founder and president of Justice for Migrant Women. She's also the co-founder of the Latinx House, Poderistas, and the Alianza Nacional de Campesinas. Monica, welcome to Activista Rise Up.
Thank you so much. And I love Activista Rise Up. Thank you so much for putting this together and for all of your leadership.
I really meant to when I say that, we as women do a lot of stuff, with our families, with our profession. And then those of us who care about activism, sometimes it's like, am I making a change? Am I seeing progress? And during the pandemic, I felt that many of us were feeling exhausted. And then I said, but there's a lot of people out there really struggling. How can we inspire each other to keep moving forward? And that was how I started Activista Rise Up, because I wanted other leaders to listen and learn from other leaders. So you were part of the network that kept me going because I saw all the things that you were doing. But I know about you, but my listeners don't know about you. So why don't you tell us about who Monica Ramirez is and what got you started in activism?
Well, thank you so much for your kind words and for your support and for your love. My work and who I am as a person is very much rooted in my family and my family's history. So I am the daughter and granddaughter of migrant farm workers. I am a rural Latina. I live in Ohio, where my family settled out of the migrant stream. And for me, I think that activism, that was just in my blood. I inherited that from my family. I was prepared to be an activist because when I was a really young girl, my father, my mother, made it a priority to teach me and my siblings about what it meant to be a farm worker in this country and what it was like for them growing up. My father started working in the fields when he was 8. My mom started working in the fields when she was 5. And unfortunately, not a lot has changed when it comes to the conditions for farm workers in our country. There's still low pay. There's still exposure to pesticides. There's still so many problems. And so my parents raised myself and my sister and brother to understand the problems, but more importantly, to understand that we had a responsibility to help and to do something. And so I guess I formally started my activism when I was 14 years old. And I took up an issue with the local newspaper about their failure to highlight and to share the stories of farm workers in our community. And that's actually how I got my first newspaper beat. I became the writer for the newspaper about things that had to do with the farm worker community, and they had to do with Latinos in the area where I live. And, I just haven't stopped since then. I've just continued to grow in my activism and leadership and really deepen the relationships with our community to better listen and understand what needs to happen and how to work together to make the most important changes needed at whatever given time during COVID or whatever time.
Yeah. I often said that that passion for the causes that we care about come from our upbringing and seeing our parents or having an experience that really, really connected us. You just talked about that, seeing your parents be migrant workers and understanding how much work that is and the sacrifices that they make to build a better future for ourselves. Tell me a little bit about your own professional career, because you went to college at Ohio State. I know you are a Buccaneer from
a Buckeye, yes.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your own professional career and how, from that initial beginning, you kept going and now as a professional doing this type of work.
Yeah. So, for me, the personal experiences that really informed the work that I was later to do in my career, it was that history of farm worker community, the farm worker struggle, but also it was the issue of sexual violence. Um, Unfortunately, there are many, many people in our society who have experienced sexual violence, and people in my family um, are survivors or were survivors. I am a survivor. And so it was both. It was both my upbringing, understanding the farm worker community and the farm worker culture, and this really terrible, widespread issue of sexual violence. That was the foundation for my work, and my decision to become an attorney to specifically address that issue was informed by personal experience. And I did go to Ohio State. That's where I went to law school. I went to Loyola Chicago for my undergrad degree, and later I got my master's from Harvard. And um, all along, I went to school because I wanted to figure out how to better serve our community. So when I was at Loyola, my activism and work on campus, my education, it was all focused on how to be a farm worker organizer. When I made the decision to become an attorney, I went to law school and really tailored my education to understand how I could best represent farm workers and specifically farm worker women. And, same thing being true when I decided to get my master's at Harvard. I went there specifically to understand how to build a strong nonprofit organization. And so my education was always very closely tied to what I believe to be my mission in life and what has been my vocation my entire career. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to do that. That I was able to really focus in my education in a way that would complement and make possible what would become my career. It has become my career. So it's hard to believe that it has now been 20 years since I started my first legal project in the US. In 2003, I became the first attorney in the country to create a legal initiative focused on sexual violence and other forms of gender discrimination against farm worker women. And I've scaled that project 3 times. And that was the foundational work for what became Justice for Migrant Women. And what keeps me going in the work is the power of survivors and the belief that the change is possible. And you said we lose a lot. We definitely lose a lot, and we are definitely in struggle often, but we win a lot too. And our community, the Latinx community, the farm worker community, farm worker women, migrant women, and those of us who come from those families, we are powerful, and we're change makers who are making change every single day. And that is what keeps me in the work. That's what keeps me going.
One of the most exciting things that I remember about the work that you've done around gender violence for migrant women is when you were able to connect the Me Too movement in the Hollywood with and make that connection with migrant women and how, so tell me a little bit about that, because that was transformative work. So can you share that experience of how you were able to make those two movements come together?
Yeah, so during the time when actresses around the country were speaking out about sexual violence against them by Harvey Weinstein and by other people in the entertainment industry, at that point I had been organizing alongside farm worker women for many years to address this problem of sexual violence because people might not realize this, but for farm worker women, sexual violence is rampant. It is normalized. It is commonplace for the women who do the work every day to feed us. And so for a long time, many of us were organizing to address the issue. And when the actresses started speaking out, first of all, it wasn't the first time that we had ever joined forces or spoken in solidarity with another industry. We had spoken on behalf of hotel workers and teachers and others, but nobody paid attention.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we made the decision to speak out in solidarity with the women in Hollywood that people finally took notice. And we made the decision. At that time, I was the president of the board of Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, and we made the decision that when the women in Hollywood started to receive backlash, because you might remember there was a point in time when they started to speak out, and shortly thereafter, people were saying things like, well, they're rich and they're famous and they should have come forward. And why are they complaining? And, all these things were being said. And so people were trying to squash them.
Yeah.
They were trying to silence them. And so we felt at that moment that it was very important for us to say that we believed them. And so I wrote a letter that has become known as the Dear Sisters letter, and it was published in Time magazine, and it was essentially an open letter to women in Hollywood. And in that letter, we basically said to them, we see you and we understand you and we believe you and we're here for you. And I think that, at the time when I wrote the letter, I didn't understand what it was going to change. Frankly, it was something that we wrote with love, and we were trying to help keep them from being silenced. And what ended up happening is when the women in Hollywood read it, and when other people read it, it was like it just shifted things. People considered farm worker women and the women in Hollywood to be the most unlikely partners. People didn't think farm worker women and women in Hollywood ever before had anything in common. But when we were able to shed light on this common problem of sexual violence, then people were able to see, like, oh, it's not just farm worker women, it's not just women in Hollywood, it's women in restaurants, it's domestic workers, it's factory workers, it's so many other people. And I think that sort of ability to see each other with our hearts,
Yes.
that is what allowed for the transformative change to happen.
Yeah. And that's the key. There's moments that we are able to make those connections between movements and expand the power of telling our stories. Because I truly believe that what you've done very well is allow farm worker women, to tell their story of what they experience on the fields, and doing this very essential work and connecting that with what women in Hollywood were doing. So I applaud you for elevating that and making it real, that we might have separate professions, but we actually experience the same type of violence in the workplace. Um, so I applaud that work, and I think that it shed light into a lot of the work that we need to do to create alliances across movements. In that light, I also know that you founded, because I do know that you believe in storytelling. So I know
Yeah.
you founded the Latinx House, to sort of continue telling the Latino story and the story of migrant women. So can you tell me a little bit of that project, and because it's that's very exciting to me.
Yes. Well, first of all, Doctora, I said no to that project. And Olga Segura, who's a filmmaker and a co-founder of the Latinx House, and Alex Martinez Kondracki, who are the other two founders, the other founder, they were very persistent. So they came to me and they said, well, I met them through Time's Up, and they were two of the original founders of Time's Up. And they came to me and they said, Monica, we want to build something at Sundance because the Latinx community doesn't have representation in the way that we need to. And Sundance is a gatekeeper so that Latinx filmmakers can actually break into Hollywood. They make the decisions about basically what we will see on the big screen. And, I'm an organizer, you're an organizer. We have to make decisions about how we're going to spend our time. And I said, nope, I'm not going to do that, because my people, the people who I serve, they don't know about Sundance. They don't care about Sundance. And I'm not going to spend my energy there, because I've got to focus on the work that they want to prioritize. And so I said no, like 3 times. And they were very persistent and came back to me. And finally I said, okay, fine. I will build the Latinx House with you, but on a couple of conditions. First of all, it cannot only be focused on people in Hollywood. It can not only be focused on filmmakers. It can not only be about Sundance. And second, we have to be able to build this house, which celebrates the excellence of the Latinx community, in a way that it is centering the leadership of people across our communities. And it needs to be something that we set up in what I call places and spaces of consequence.
Yeah.
And so they agreed.
Yeah.
And thank goodness, because what we've been able to build since we launched in 2020, we actually did our first kind of public campaign in the wake of the El Paso massacre. We organized the Querida Familia letter that was published in the New York Times, and alongside America Ferrer and Eva Longoria and Diane Guerrero. And that letter was a love letter to our community during this time of pain and tragedy. That was our first official kind of act as Latinx House. But then in January of 2020, we launched the house, and we did launch it at Sundance Film Festival. And, we were able to bring farm worker women and domestic workers and some of the biggest directors and actors, et cetera, together in this house. And we were able to celebrate their leadership and to put them in community together, because I believe if we can put domestic workers and farm workers and other leaders in our community together in community, that's how magic can happen. So that's how we launched. And since then, we've been continuing to build on that work. We've built our house, which is basically like a physical space. We take over a physical space and we curate programming. We have music and panel conversations and flash talks, et cetera. And so we've set up at South by Southwest. We've created an Oscars event, and most recently we created a festival called Raizado, which we launched at Aspen, in Aspen, Colorado. And the goal of that project was really to create what I like to call in my organizing a record scratching moment, that something so big and unexpected that kind of everyone has to stop and look, kind of like what happens when a record scratches, right?
Yeah.
And I think we were able to achieve that because even though the Latinx community is part of the backbone of Aspen, Colorado, this really wealthy and beautiful place with a lot of power, our community had been basically invisible there, even though we're the cooks and the janitors and the groundskeepers and other roles there. And so by taking over this city of Aspen and bringing together some of our most well-known thought leaders and culture creators, et cetera, it really made people stop and look. And because of that, we were able to, I think, really inspire change. And, I made a 10-year commitment when I created that festival. So we're now getting ready for year 2, and maybe you can come join us. We'd love that.
Oh, awesome. I would love to join you and continue in this mixture of culture, education, activism, and how, I truly believe that our artists are part of our storytelling. We need to be in community with them so that they get inspired by all the stories of the leaders, of the workers. So I thought it was a great idea when I saw that you were doing it. And I also admire how you take advantage of every opportunity you get to continue the activism. It's like elevating the activism to a bigger platform. And I think that that's a responsibility that all of us have to figure out. How do I elevate the voices of the people who I'm trying to support in their work? So I want to commend you for that. And one of the other campaigns that I joined, because I've been so excited by all the how you mix activism and culture and your positional power, because I think you are, I every time I see you gaining another position, I always see you keeping your true self for the purpose of what you're doing. So I joined you on the Latina Equal Pay campaign, and I have the shirt here.
Yes, I love the shirt. I love that you're wearing it, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah. For all our listeners, the shirt says "Viva la mujer que lucha," and it was the signature campaign for Monica's effort with the Latina Equal Pay Day, which is another campaign. We here, I am also a leader for Latina issues and organizing Latina women connected to workers' issues. But tell us a little bit about why do you continue to elevate every year Latina Equal Pay Day?
Well, unfortunately, because we have to, right? Because we are so far behind, and we have this common history in that we both were affiliated with LACLA, the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. And years ago, it's now actually it'll be 9 years since I started leading the Latina Equal Pay campaign. And I did that in partnership with LACLA. We built the campaign together. And the reason is because at least 9 years ago, Latinas had always been experiencing the pay gap, but there really hadn't been a specific focus on that and how the gap affected Latinas and our families. And so we were able to build this campaign that's now become this really robust national effort. And, we're being denied half of our pay on average. The most recent statistics show us that Latinas are only being paid 54 cents to the dollar. And, people would be shocked, I think, to know that immigrant Latinas are being paid only 46 cents to the dollar. And, so less than half. And um, it's really important that we continue to call out the fact that we are only being paid half as much as we should be paid. And I always am very careful about the language I use when I talk about the pay gap, because people will say that Latina Equal Pay Day is the day that Latinas catch up. And you know as well as I do, we're not catching up.
No, no.
By the time we reach Latina Equal Pay Day, we're almost a year behind, another year behind. For Latinas, it'll take us over 200 years to earn to be paid what a white male worker was paid in just for a 40-year career. So it's really important that we continue to talk about these issues, that we talk about what it means for our ability to retire, what it means for our ability to put our kids through school, to save for the future, to prepare ourselves for a crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, more than 1 million Latinas were pushed out of the workforce in the early part of the pandemic in 2020, and some Latinas haven't gone back to work. And the reason that the Latinas were pushed out of the workforce is because we were not in jobs that provided the support, the policies, etc., to allow us to continue to be in our jobs. And as a community, when you look at the Latinas as a demographic group, we over-index in lower paying jobs. So we need to understand that we are not catching up on Latina Equal Pay Day. We are marking a day to call to attention the fact that Latinas are being drastically underpaid. And the other thing I would say is it's really important when we think about the language around equal pay that we don't say things like Latinas have earned. No, that's what we were paid.
Yeah.
We earned the full dollar and should have been paid the full dollar, but we're only being paid half of that. The other thing it's really important for us to talk about is that people will say, well, Latinas should not be so meek. Latinas should learn how to negotiate better. Latinas should become more prepared to ask for what they want. That is gaslighting.
Yeah.
It is not our job to make sure that we are being treated justly. It is the job of employers to make sure that they are treating us justly and equitably.
Exactly. Yes, it is. It is their job, and they're not doing it. And our demand has always been those in charge of making the policies to make employers pay what they're supposed to be paying, or to be listening to our experiences and our voices. And that's what I join you on the Latina Equal Pay Day, because it's about bringing light, but also it's about demanding the right policies for our
That's
community.
right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. In the, there's so many causes, and you do such great work elevating the different causes and folks, how people can join. But it seems like, what gives you hope that you're making change? Like, what would you say to a young person who feels overwhelmed about all the crises that we're having with gun violence, with climate change, with the fact that we're still talking about Latinas being paid an equal salary? So what would you say maybe to your young self, or to a young Latina or a young Latino who's saying, well, if things are so bad, there's nothing I can do?
I last night we had an event, and it was in honor of Carla Sosa, the actress, who's incredible, and she made a movie called Dive. And the movie is beautiful, and it is painful, and it is about the issue of sexual violence against athletes. And there was a young woman in the room, and she stood up. She was very emotional, and she started to cry, and she said what you're saying. She felt so overwhelmed, and she felt so angry, and that things are this way, and that things aren't changing, and that people aren't listening. And what I said to her, and what I believe is, first of all, somos hermanas. We are sisters. We are united. We are linked. We are connected. And we have to understand that we are not holding all of this by ourselves, and shouldn't hold it by ourselves. And that together we can and we will make change. But the other thing I believe is that, whether you're a survivor of sexual violence or domestic violence, like I am, and so many others, I truly believe that we have figured out a way to anchor and to harness our pain and our fury and our feelings of overwhelm, of being overwhelmed, like we are figuring out how to harness that and how to turn that into the fuel that keeps us moving forward to make the changes that we're making. And I believe that we are a tidal wave that cannot be stopped, that will not be stopped. There is no going back. We have opened Pandora's box, and things that had been taboo are now very much out in the public and in society. We're having these really needed conversations. And so what I said to her and what I would say to my younger self and to young people listening, we are the change, and we are creating the world of our dreams every single day through big and small actions. And we have to rest assured that change is happening because we are willing it, we are forcing it to happen. And when you get tired, rest. When you get overwhelmed, take a break, stop, pause, because you have to believe that there are many other people who are continuing to march forward. And you will march with us again once you feel rested and once you feel less overwhelmed. And we just have to keep looking forward and moving forward together.
When you are having those moments that you feel alone, how do you keep connected to the movement, even when you need to rest? Because you're absolutely right. We need to pause sometimes. Um, do you have a support system that keeps you connected to yourself and reminds you of your purpose?
Yeah, I mean, first, I have a therapist. I needed that for myself, because I'm still in my healing journey, because my work is really difficult. I deal with a lot of tragic issues. And so therapy is really important to me. And I'm proud of it. I'm not ashamed of having therapists. And I don't think any of us should be ashamed of seeking mental health support if we need it. But my family, I'm very, very close to my family. I do my work in honor of my family, in honor of my community. My husband and son are incredible. And so my friends and family really ground me and hold me. Um, and, I've been really fortunate that throughout my professional career, I've been able to make some really incredible friends in the movement. And we're able to talk about when we're frustrated or feeling defeated and I'm so fortunate to have a safe space that I've been able to create with those friends, because I would be absolutely lying to you if I were to say things are always great, or I'm never tired, or I'm never frustrated. I'm often tired and I'm often frustrated, but I have outlets, and I'm really appreciative of those outlets that I have. And I think more now, I'm thinking a lot about how to care for myself in the work. How do I keep myself in this work for 40 more years? Um, you know, what does that look like? And how do I step aside so that I can make sure that I am making room for these incredible leaders, young leaders who have great ideas and fire in their bellies, because I also believe that's important for us too. We need to make room for new people to lead, and we need to step aside. And so I think a lot about how do I step aside to make room, but also how do I step aside to make sure that I'm making the time I need to make to take care of myself.
And that's so important. Talking about the need for our mental health, the need for the support that we need to build for the moments that we feel exhausted and tired. I think that's so important to acknowledge, right? That we're not machines,
That's
uh,
right.
and that we do get exhausted and tired, and that it's okay to say it, and that it's okay to have other people to support you. And if it's, like you say, you have a family. I have a family that supports me, but sometimes, some people don't, and they have to create their own family outside
Yeah.
of their network. So that is okay. I wanted to ask you that because most of the time, um, we expect our leaders to be infallible, and we sometimes are not infallible. We also are dealing with our own demons and our own trauma, right? That
Yeah.
that's specifically this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. I wanted to talk to my Latinas, my Latinos, Latinx, that we do have to seek mental health as a community. We don't talk a lot about those traumas. So thank you for elevating that very important part of this work. So how can people support your work, and how can they stay connected with you? Because you're an inspiration to me, but you're an inspiration to many. So how they can support the work that you continue to do?
Thank you so much. So I have a lot of organizations, as you mentioned, and so I guess the easiest place is to just look for me on social. I'm easy to find, activist Monica Ramirez, but my organizations all have their own social media platforms: Justice for Migrant Women, Poderistas, and the Latinx House. Latinx House and Poderistas, the handles are just their names.
Yeah.
And then Justice for Migrant Women is a little bit harder. It's Mujeres Rising. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. And also we have YouTube channels. But the best way that people can support our work is by talking about it and figuring out your personal connection to our work. When people think about the anti-sexual violence movement, sometimes they say, well, somebody else is doing that work and that's not my work. No, all of our work has connections. And I think that the best way people can support any of the organizations that I've helped to start or have started is by thinking about what is your personal connection to this issue, to this organization, and how in your own immediate circle can you start to elevate the issues, to talk about the work. In New Jersey, there's a lot of farm workers who live in New Jersey. There's a great organization named Gata that's based there. How do we support them? With the Latinx community, the Latina community, are we consuming the content that our creators are making? Are we watching the movies and TV shows and buying the books and buying the art? We all need to, right? Because that is how those creators can continue to do their work to authentically and beautifully represent us. So the best way that people can support me and my work and my organizations is by finding your personal connection to them and starting there to help elevate our work and your own personal connection to it.
That's exactly what Activista Rise Up is all about. It's about elevating different organizations, different leaders, different ways that people can support the causes of transformational change in society, which is what we are trying to make happen for our community. So thank you for coming to our show, Monica, and thank you for doing all that you do to elevate our story. And I am looking forward to joining you at the next Latinx House, because I love that I was watching and following you. So, so I want to, and I do agree, promoting the stories of Latinos and the artists is also about us needing to hear our own stories on the big picture. So thank you for putting that plug in for Latinx House and for just being who you are in this work.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you and your leadership. And I hope that all of your listeners are giving you lots of ongoing love, because you need support too. And I'm here to support you as well.
Thank you so much. And let's be out there and let's keep organizing and let's keep changing the world. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
You heard it. Activism is about choosing where you want to make a difference. We have a lot of great causes, a lot of great leaders, and Monica. At the end of the day, you can create your own cause, or you can just join them, elevate them, find a place where you feel that your purpose is being met. We need you. We need people that want to change the world so that we can actually change it. Join Activista Rise Up, join our causes, follow me on all my social media, and let's take action together. Si se puede, Activista Rise Up.